So Bob Daly is our speaker. I think, as they say in show business, he needs no introduction. Bob has been a friend a long time. He's worked for the Woodlands Township. He's worked for the Woodlands Water Agency as an outreach and communications person, conservation. He had a whole lot of jobs before that. He also is now retired, but also writes a blog about native plants, et cetera, and organic gardening. He has recently been elected the president of the local chapter of as you see, the Pines and Prairies chapter of the Native Plant Society. He talks at the library. He'll talk pretty much anywhere that you ask him to spread the word about native plants and organics. And from what I can read in his bio and his my personal knowledge of him, I think he's been talking about these issues for about 75 years. Sorry, Bob. So I think appreciate you showing up tonight. And again, I became a native plant. 2 or 3 years ago, I changed my garden to all natives, and 2 years in a row, they've frozen down to the ground. And 2 years in a row, they're all back strong. And it's true what they say about them. So let's, Bob, go ahead and start your conversation about native plants in Montgomery County.
Thanks, Paul. I suppose everybody can hear me well.
Yep.
One of the things that I got drawn to the Pines and Prairies chapter to Native Plant Society is my love of native plants and of gardening and soil. And they all tie in some way. And I want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about soil tonight. I have a whole different presentation on soil, how important it is. But I am going to talk about native plants and their relationship to where we are right now and where we are going as far as population and the destruction of native wildscapes in Montgomery County. And I hope this brings some information to you. Let's go on, and I say let's go on, Paul. There we go. So what are native plants? And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because I know I am. I looked at the list of our members, the founding members, and many of you are already on this. I know Paul and Terry are definitely on it. I'm not sure about John, but the rest of you are on it. And I have a list on the back of it at the end of this presentation. So you can see on the screen, it's plants that occur naturally. And there's different kinds of areas in which those native plants exist. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well. But native plants are low maintenance. Paul's a good example of that. I certainly am, because I like to do the least amount of work as possible, especially now. But one of the great things about native plants is that insects here have co-evolved with them. And local birds and beneficial insects cannot survive without native plants. And this spreads out. I mean, we talk about local birds, native birds. I'm not just talking about birds that eat seed. I'm talking about peregrine falcons. We had a peregrine falcon on our fence the other day, and we had a bald eagle that lands in our tree, our big oak tree in the back, regularly. And so all of these things, the predator birds, the predator animals, although we don't have a lot of predator animals left, the flowers themselves, the insects, all of those things combine to make this what it is. Our place is what it is. For instance, native oak trees support over 500 species of caterpillars. When it takes over 6,000 caterpillars to raise one brood of chickadees, oak trees become pretty significant. And that's just oaks. And there are plenty more plants that support a number of insects, which themselves support a number of birds, but also mammals as well. I followed a bunny rabbit trail through my garden this morning, and it's interesting. These rabbits are coming through. They're eating some native plants. They're going to be food for an owl one day. So and I have some owls too that bed up back here. Healthy environment for people. Uh, we have, I think I've said this before, and you may have heard me say this, that there are 4 million acres of lawns in the state of Texas. You can't eat it. You can't wear it. And for sure, unless you are so inclined, you can't smoke it. But large amounts of artificial fertilizer, synthetic pesticides, synthetic herbicides are totally destroying not only our native plants, but also our marine life in the rivers and streams and eventually out into the Gulf of Mexico. The traditional suburban lawn on average uses 10 times more chemical pesticides per acre than farmland. By using natives, we created a healthier place for us, our families, and our communities. And I'll give you an example. I served on the Louisiana State Mineral Board for 4 years as chairman, and it's similar to the Texas Railroad Commission. And we did a study on Lake Pontchartrain because people were complaining that there were some oil problems in there. The oil might be leaking or something. So we did a study on it, and we found this. Yes, there was oil leaking. No, it was not the major pollutant. The major pollutant was runoff from the streets and lawns of people in New Orleans. That was the major polluter of Lake Pontchartrain. And to me, that kind of says something about what's happening. I remember Lake Pontchartrain. We used to catch speckled trout in there and redfish and full of oysters and all kinds of great crabs, shrimp. That doesn't exist anymore. So what we're doing is, and eventually New Orleans has become an island anyway, so it might not matter, but helping the climate. Native plants can combat climate change. They reduce noise and carbon pollution from lawnmower exhaust. Native plants are effective in storing greenhouse gases, and that's incredibly important where we are now. And some people are very skeptical about what's going to happen in the future, and if we are able to save our environment. Conserving water. Native plants are adapted to local environment conditions. They need less water. They're saving time, money. The most valuable resource is water. And I've said this millions of times. You will never see the price of water as low as it is now. It's an incredibly precious resource. And if we don't take care of it, then we are not upholding our responsibilities. I hate to sound like a preacher, so if you feel guilty, please disregard what I said. Or if you do feel guilty, maybe you should look at that. So resources, and so now here we're talking about water. So we talked about carbon sequestration. We talked about native insects, birds, animals, mammals, humans, the marine life, and everything else that is in direct response to native plants. These native plants have succeeded in creating a wonderful environment for millions, actually billions of years. And these insects have evolved with them. And the insects become food for the plants, but not for the birds and other animals. But they also provide pollination and preservation of these plants. So wildlife, vital habitat. As I said, I have a rabbit running through my yard, and insects are full of beauty and diversity. I have hummingbirds now in my backyard, four types of doves. Just found a hummingbird that I guess he blew off course. He was indigenous to the southern coast of California, but he's here, so we fed him. We have hawks, we have redbirds, we have cardinals, we have cowbirds, cuckoos that are actually laying their eggs, have laid their eggs in a cardinal's nest, and the cardinal raised it. So I see this the other day, we saw this gigantic cowbird and a tiny cardinal feeding the cowbird, which was actually a chick, but outsized his quote parent. So anyway, this is a whole ecosystem there, and I'm going to talk about all of these. If you have questions, just put them in there. So here's a simple idea of the different kinds of soils, the different kinds of native plants, the different kinds of hilliness or mountains or lowlands. This is a simple explanation, but here is a much more detailed area. And I want to talk about this because, as you can see, over to the western side of Texas is totally different than the eastern side of Texas, and the southern part is totally different than the northern part. There are so many different ecosystems in the state of Texas. If you look under the red square, that's where Montgomery County is, and some of the other counties as well. And that's a good example of the diversity that we have here in Montgomery County. We actually have three intersecting ecoregions that occur here. So we have three kinds of different plants that are intersecting here in Montgomery County. As you can see from the chart, these are all the different kinds of ecoregions in the whole state. And it's mind-boggling. There's a lot of them. But native plants that grow here don't grow in West Texas. Native plants that grow in West Texas generally do not grow here, although I have seen some survive. So let's take a closer look at the ecoregions in Montgomery County. Here, this blue area, kind of bluish area here, which takes up about, I guess, about a half of, almost half of Conroe, of Montgomery County. This is Montgomery County right here, is flatwoods. And this goes all the way to the Louisiana border on the east, and it goes all the way almost to Hempstead on the west. Then you have this big green thing right here, and this is southern tertiary uplands, which is different. I mean, here you have flatwoods, just lots of pine, loblolly pine and oak. And up here, it's a different kind of ecoregion. But you also have this little piece right here, which is really interesting. This is part of the Fayette Blackland Prairie. And it just juts in here right around, I guess, just west of Lake Conroe, may have even part of Lake Conroe may have even been taken from this area. So we have these three massive, beautiful ecoregions that intersect here. And it makes for an interesting conglomeration of plants and beauty. Here's a census tracts. I got some of this information from HGAC, and I'm sure you've heard this before. In 2012, we predicted, or some HGAC, I think, predicted that there would be 1 million people here by the year 2050. Guess what? That ain't happening. There'll be more than that. Anyway, here's a household population. This is the greater Houston area right here. And you can see, and this is 2018. So here we are in Montgomery County right here. This is all Montgomery County, and you can see the development here. Now, this is 2018. Please take a trip around the county and see how many new subdivisions, plus 99 coming through this area, all the other highways that are being built in this area, expansions that we're seeing, service stations and mini malls and restaurants and everything else pop up all over the place. I live in Willis, and Willis is now part of Houston. I mean, it's one town from here to downtown Houston. So, you know, there's no distance between Conroe and Willis. There's no distance really between Willis and Conroe and the Woodlands. And from the Woodlands south, it's all city, but it also is here too. So we're going to be an urban area, a whole urban or suburban area for in the next few years. Here's subdivisions in 2019 in Montgomery County. Guess what? We could probably double this number right now. I drive all over the place and I see, I mean, if you've never driven to New Caney recently or Montgomery, the town of Montgomery, it's incredible, the developments that are going on. Now, household population. Let's look at what's happening here. I said that we estimated that by 2050 there would be 1 million people here. Well, guess what? In 10 years, it's going to be 1 million people here. Not 2050. It's 20 years sooner than people expected. We'll have 1.2 million in 1945. So we'll probably have 1.3 million in 2050, maybe even more than that. So it's significant. Our growth has been exponential. And as a result, we have more people living here, more yards, more lawns, more grass, more roads, more shopping malls, all of which are impermeable surfaces, and that water runs off into the streams or into the land, into the spillways, wherever it's going. Here's the population change from 2001 to 2022 in Montgomery County. So, good Lord, look at this. Look at where we are now. And this is not going to stop. This is continue to go. So this is from actually from Paul, I think. This is from Hark. The biggest threat to wildlife and habitat today is the breakup of large land holdings into smaller tracts, the massive construction of highways and urban development around them, runoff, changes the flow of water, and changes the landscape. The division of ownership and associated change in land is called land fragmentation. And I don't think I have to explain that to you. You already know what land fragmentation is, but if you don't, email me and I'll be happy, or put it in the chat area and I'll be happy to answer. Native plant populations are subject to loss of open space, hunting pressures. I mean, I live in Willis and there are people hunting at night over here behind my house. I imagine they're spotting rabbits, but you know, they might be shooting deer. I don't know. There are not many deer left up here. When we moved here, there were plenty of deer all over. I don't see it anymore. Proliferation of potential and feral predators and introduction of exotic species that we put in our lawns. Those things are really taking over, and I'll show you some of them in a minute. But now I want to talk a little bit about plants that are native to this area. Drummond red maple. There's a beautiful Drummond red maple at the extension, at the Environmental Services and Parks Department down off Millennium. There's a great specimen of it behind the building back there, and you can take a look at it. It's really a pretty tree. And in the fall, these are the colors it has. And it is the larval food source for the mourning cloak butterfly, the tiger swallowtail, and this pretty little moth called a rosy maple moth, which is just, that's a pretty little moth. It's really pretty. Loblolly pine. I mean, we all know what loblolly pine is, and one of the real unfortunate things is that most of the longleaf pine, which was indigenous to this area, has been destroyed, has been cut down for lumber. Uh, I have one growing in my front yard, but it takes many, many years to grow them to this size, where a ponderosa can maybe get to this size in 20 or 30 years. Uh, so the one I have planted is about 6 feet tall, and I figure it'll be maybe 8 feet tall by the time I pass away. So we'll see. Elf butterfly on the loblolly pines. I mean, there is a butterfly that lays its eggs on the leaves of loblolly pines, and the larvae eat the leaves, the needles. Also, the southern pine sphinx moth, and that is a really interesting moth because you can see how well it's camouflaged. It's just astounding. White oaks, the Edwards hair streak butterfly. It's a small butterfly, but it's really, really a lovely little thing. Swamp chestnut oak. There is also a swamp chestnut oak in the uh, behind environmental services, and you go take a look at it there. Cat, and I don't remember her last name. I think it's Stevenson. Carrie knows. Is taking over that area, and she's putting in native plants all over the place again. So get a chance, go over there and talk to her and see what's going on, or talk to Terry. It is swamp chestnut oak is the larval food source for juvenile's dusky winged butterfly. How many butterflies have we already talked about with just a few trees? Eastern redbud, which Paul just planted some more in addition to his dogwoods. Native to Montgomery County, important source of food. Hummingbirds, honeybees love it. And I have two, and when they're in bloom, it's covered, literally covered with honeybees. I mean, you can stand at my front door and hear them buzz. And parsley hawthorn, I really like parsley hawthorn. It's just a hardy little tree. It's beautiful flowers. Uh, it is the larval food source for the gray hair streak butterfly, the red spotted purple butterfly, and the viceroy, which looks a lot similar to a monarch, although the viceroy is smaller. Wax myrtle. I have two wax myrtles. This is what was known at one time as bayberry, and they take these little berries and make soap or potpourri or something out of them. But it is the larval host for the hair streak butterflies, a whole bunch of different species. American beautyberry. Now, I have a thing, it provides food for all these animals, as you can see, all these birds. But I have a friend of mine who lives off Rayford, and he owns 15 acres out there, and it's low. And I was out there one day, and we were walking around, and it was in the summertime, and it was hot. And but he's got a lot of trees and a lot of shade, and his property backs up to a drainage canal. So, but I'm walking out there, and I don't have no mosquitoes. I mean, I haven't seen one mosquito while I was there. And I asked him about it. He said, well, Bob, he said, look at all the beauty berries I have out here. I said, what does that have to do with it? He said, beauty berries repel mosquitoes. I said, no. And he said, yes, it does. So I came home, and of course I had beauty berries, and I took some leaves. My granddaughter, actually, I told her about it. She said, well, let's try. She was like 14 at the time. We clipped off a bunch of leaves, we boiled them, we took the juice out of it, the water, the tea, I guess, and put a little alcohol in it, rubbing alcohol, and some orange oil, citrus oil in there, just a little bit, to make a surfactant, and used it. And we used it all summer, and it really, really works. So it's just a little, and also Linda Crum makes a great jelly out of it. So if you're interested, call her. She'll give you the recipe. Don't tell her I said to call her. Buttonbush. I have one growing right now in my front yard. There's another one growing at Environmental Services over on Millennium. Uh, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous tree. It's an understory tree. It probably won't get more than maybe 10, 12 feet. Um, but 25 species of birds eat the little nutlets of the buttonbush. Birds love the nectar, especially hummingbirds. Uh, Soil stabilizes in wet air. It likes wet areas, and it will stabilize soil in those wet areas. So if you have a pond, let's say, this is a good place to put a buttonbush, or an area of your yard that seems to dry, wash out, or it's always wet. Plant a buttonbush out there. They're smaller than a cypress, and they're attractive, so they won't take up a lot of room either. Coral beans. Ruby-throated hummingbirds love coral beans, the flower. And I'm going to show you the beans right now. That's my favorite part of the plant, the beans. If you look at the beans, they are exquisite. The scarlet beans with the black pods, black hulls on them. Just a really, really gorgeous plant. I really think and that's in the wintertime. That's when they come out, the seeds come out. But these flowers are really good. Coral boot in Louisiana, we call that the mamu plant. So I don't know what that means, but anyway. Turk's cap. Uh, I have seen hummingbirds. Well, they will go from one Turk's cap to another, taking the nectar out. Now, all plants, flowering plants, reproduce their nectar as soon as it's drained. So they'll have nectar. A hummingbird or a bee or whatever comes in, takes all the nectar out, or the butterfly, and in it will replenish that nectar to come attract other pollinators. Well, Turk's cap, which is a part of the mallow family, or hibiscus, replenishes its nectar very quickly. And so I've seen hummingbirds come in and drain one flower, fly around, and 30 minutes later come back to that same flower and get more nectar. So and it likes shade. It's a good shade plant. I just really like this plant. I have a lot of it. Now, let's talk about flowering shrubs. Green milkweed. Has anybody seen any monarchs? I know one person is Hugh Wedgeworth told me he had seen one, and actually we had some at the art festival. Somebody brought some in a jar that were eating milkweed, but we haven't seen a lot of them, and monarchs are endangered now. And I would suggest everybody plant a little milkweed in their yard. So it's also the food source for the monarch, the soldier butterfly, and the queen butterfly. And as you can see, they all look very similar, but the monarch is the most striking, I think, and it it's much bigger than the other two. Wine cup. Now this is a really pretty plant. It's almost a ground cover. Doesn't get too high, but it's really, really gorgeous. And it is the larval host for the gray hair streak butterfly. Blue mist flower. I have some blue mist, and I have to keep it in check, but it is really a pretty flower. It grows quickly, and it needs to be disciplined. So get a whip out there and make it behave. But really an important nectar source. I get up in the morning, go out there, and it's full of bees and butterflies. It's really pretty. Lance leaf coreopsis. And I'll point it out. That's why they call it lance leaf, because the leaf looked like a lance. It attracts pollinators, and also the seeds are real important to songbirds. So what I do with lance leaf is I just leave it, and the petals will fall off, but the seeds will be there, and songbirds will come in the wintertime and eat the seeds. So it's a really double kind of benefit. Gara, bees, butterflies, hummingbirds love it. Absolutely love it. Gay feather. Liatris pycnostochia. My mother's name was Liatris, and I think it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. It's just, we had planted some not too long ago, and it's beautiful. Cardinal flower, Lobelia cardinalis. You can see that hummingbirds loving it. Bee balm, bergamot. But bees love it. There's a bee. If you look over here, there's a honeybee right there. So I really like bergamot. You can make a good tea out of it too. It's really, really nice tea. Fall obedient plant. Whoops. Beautiful plant. Blue sage, Salvia azurea. Tropical sage, scarlet sage, Salvia coccinea. Sages are beautiful. They're salvias, actually. And the salvias come in all kinds of different colors. I don't know if anybody ever heard the story of Greg Grant. Greg Grant is a lecturer and he's a writer, but he's also county agent up in East Texas. And he one of his hobbies was going around in the woods and old homesteads and stuff like that, looking for plants that had never been discovered yet, for varieties. And he was in the cemetery one day, an old cemetery, and he saw this beautiful fuchsia salvia growing at the side of a tomb, and the tomb was Julia Dulberg. And he thought, what a great flower. Looked it up, never been identified. He took some seeds, he propagated it, and he called it Julia Dulberg salvia. Well, next to Julia, there was another grave, her husband. And there was a white salvia that had never been named growing next to his. So he named that white salvia after the husband. And they're now available. You can get them at nurseries. So if you like those, I just think it's a real great story. Scarlet sage, ground covers. Let's talk about ground covers. Horse herb is a great, great ground cover. You can cut it back to the ground. It's just great. It can replace grass. There's another one called frog fruit. I'm going to show you in a minute. That's also really great. But I kind of like this is beautiful right here. I think it's gorgeous where you have this, the horse herb climbing up the fence and you have some fern and other things growing in there. It's just beautiful. And here's what it looks like cut. I mean, it's really pretty. It looks more textural than a St. Augustine grass, but it's also very beautiful and it's replenishing the soil. Frog fruit, same thing. This is so beautiful right here. And this is it cut on the lower left. You just trim it with a lawnmower or weed eater. Or I have a friend of mine lives in Atlanta, and he's a psychiatrist. I keep him as a friend because I probably need it occasionally. And he he rented some sheep to keep his grass cut. They bring them in once a week, once a month or something like that, and they eat all his grass and then they pick them up and bring them back to where they came from. Well, I think it's really interesting. Pigeonberry. The pigeonberry, if you look on pigeonberry, look at this picture. Pigeonberry has flowers and berries at the same time. It's not a high growing plant, it's a ground cover, but doves love it. But having the flowers and the fruit on it at the same time, you get the double advantage of being available to insects and being available to birds. And birds love it. So it's a great way. Coralberry, same kind of thing. It's just a beautiful, beautiful plant. Wood fern. I love wood fern. It's a great backdrop plant. Vines. This is crossvine. This is absolutely a really interesting and colorful plant. and it's growing on a fence somewhere. And I think it's just really lovely. This is Carolina jessamine. It's not jasmine, it's a jessamine. And I call this the harbinger of spring, because if you look in the woods in early spring, this is going to be blooming before in Montgomery County, before you have your hyacinths blooming or anything else. This is going to be blooming. This is the first indication of spring. These bloom before pecan trees, so that you know that it's coming. And this is what the flower looks like. It's just a pretty little flower. And coral honeysuckle, I have some of this. This is really, really pretty. But what's really pretty about it is two things. One, kids can come by and suck the honey out of the honeysuckle, which is great. I have my neighbor's kids come over and pick my carrots, and they're like 4 and 6, and they picked my carrots, and I had them. Of course, then I had to wash them and trim them. That was fine. They took some back home with them, but teach them how to do this, and they love it. How to eat the honey from the honeysuckle. Passion flower. We have our own native passion flower. It's called a leather flower, and but this passion flower is also native to our area, and it is the parent of the larval source of the Gulf fritillary and the variegated fritillary. And I think the Gulf fritillary larvae is really, really an interesting larvae, if you ever get a chance to see one. And over to the left, you see the fruit. We used to call this maypops, and people used to make jelly out of them. Maybe they still do. We used to pick them in the woods. Invasives. Let's talk a little. How am I doing for time here? Oh, okay. Invasives. Air potato. If any of you have ever worked with Kathy Herrick, you know this plant. The interesting thing about this plant is not only does it shade out other plants, trees, other plants, it also changes the soil, the nature of the soil, and makes the nutrients unavailable to native plants. So not only is it invasive in the sense that it grows everywhere, it also changes the soil, and so plant natives can't grow in that environment. So I think I don't know how many tons of air potatoes you guys with the Woodlands Green have pulled down, but I know you've done a wonderful job. I mean, I was so impressed with that. And here's what the air potato looks like. I moved from the Woodlands, and for some reason, the people in the Woodlands we bought the house from had air potatoes growing all over their backyard. And for some way, one got into my compost. And when we moved up here to Willis, I was planting some plant. Here comes a potato plant, an air potato plant that grew right up into the thing. Took me a long time to kill it. Chinese privet, it's also known as ligustrums. You've heard of those. Really invasive. It's a real invasive plant. And my dad had some. I said, Dad, cut those down. He said, no, I love them. And I'm sure people love them. Make a great hedge. But they're really, really an invasive plant. And what they do is they take over space that was once occupied by native plants. So they force them out. They force out the native plants. And the only thing that will feed on these things are honeybees. And that's great. But there are 4,000 species of native bees in the state of Texas. 4,000. And those need nectar too, but they cannot feed on non-native plants. They must have native plants, the flowers from native plants, and specific ones, most probably, to create food for them. So the Chinese privet is not something that we can look at lightly. Say, oh well, yeah, it's in the way, or maybe it's a dangerous plant, and it does not benefit our environment. And the way you can tell, look at the leaves. The leaves are opposite, not alternate, as you can see. Opposite opposite. If they were alternate, they would be a leaf here and a leaf here, a leaf here, a leaf here. So this is one of the ways you can identify Chinese privet. And Japanese honeysuckle, oh my God. Please, if you have some growing in your yard, pull it up. It's a horrible plant. And it just goes forever. I mean, it'll grow here on this fence, it'll grow down in the neighbor's yard, it'll cross over to the next neighbor's yard. And what it's doing is it's shading out plants in the ground, but it also, like air potato, changes the structure of the soil and makes the nutrients unavailable to native plants. And this is a real culprit, Nandina. Nandina is hard to control. People love it. Oh, it's such a pretty plant, you know. Well, yeah, you know, it is a pretty plant, but it has absolutely no value, none in our, except to look at it. And you know, these plants that I'm talking about, the invasives, are all that's Chinese tallow, are all in some way, they're like, people don't regard them as plants. People regard them as kind of ornaments in their yards. And it's great to have an ornament, but it also needs to have a purpose, in my mind. Purposeful plants, Nandina has no purpose except to look pretty if you like that look. So it has no purpose. So pull it up if you have it. And of course, the Chinese tallow. There along the Bear Branch and Panther Creek, on the right of way through the following the creeks, there's tons of Chinese tallow out there, tons of them. They're all over the place out there, and that's why they're invading the whole area. I've many yards. If you drive through the woodlands or drive anywhere in the county, you'll see tons of Chinese tallow. There's I don't know, thousands of Chinese tallow in the woodlands. People grow them in their yards because they like the fall color. Get a maple, you know, get a red maple. They're much prettier and they don't destroy the environment. These plants are so productive that they will force out all the other plants in the area. They're not allelopathic as I once thought. They are just, they drop these seeds and these seeds will grow. I've seen in the woodlands, when they cut some trees down, they cut them down and they chip them up and put them in a pile. The chips, I have seen this tree root from a chip of a tiny chip of a tree. I mean, this thing is very aggressive. My dad and I, we had farmland and we were trying to get rid of them and it was almost impossible. Chinese tallow now in South Louisiana has become the dominant tree in South Louisiana. And in Southeast Texas, it's quickly becoming a dominant tree here. So it's something we really need to look at for these Chinese tallow. Now, I'm almost through. Here's some charter members of the Native Plant Society of Texas, the Pines and Prairies chapter. Carol Childress, Kim Cox, me, Aaron Duriski, Don Dubois, Kathy Herrick, Kathy, I hope you're here. Carolyn Langlanay, David Lemons, Terry MacArthur, Gail McConnell, Mike McGee, Paul Nelson. Who is that guy? Martin Simonton. Martin runs the Lone Star Nursery. It's native plants over in Montgomery. Carson Stokes and Anita Tiller and John Ferguson of Nature's Way Resources sponsored the chapter. So wanted to thank John too. And that's my presentation for the Native Plant Society of Texas. Whoops, sorry. Any questions? No questions?
As always, excellent job. We've been tracking the questions and comments, and I will try to go ahead and let Terry help me. But the first one I have is that Gillian says, I have beauty berries that are dying one by one, not sure why. Do you have any comments about that? I personally, the oldest tree, except for pines and oaks on my property, is a beauty berry that was here a long time ago when I moved in, and it's faithful every year. But Terry or anyone have any ideas about that?
I,
Why they'd be dying?
I, unless it's something in the soil, or I wonder if they're mulching it with some of that dyed black mulch or red mulch or something, because that can you never there's all kinds of poisons in that stuff. It could be that if they're putting mulch on there.
And Bob, you might suggest when you're having trouble figuring out what's going on with your plants to get a soil test.
Good idea. And you can do that through Texas A&M. Just go on the internet and type in Texas A&M soil testing, and it'll bring you right to the site. Or you can go by extension and pick up a little bag and instructions. Either one.
I have Marjorie who says she's had a couple of monarchs on their milkweed.
Wow.
I don't have a lot of it. I haven't seen a monarch, and I don't know, Terry, maybe it seemed like it was just a few weeks ago that we read that they're down by like 90%.
Yeah.
Some horrible number that and it's all about habitat, I think.
Yep.
So
I agree.
I'm glad they're there and keep trying.
Well, to the point that Bob was making about invasive species, as those monarchs are migrating south or north, either way, as they're migrating and they're laying eggs for generation after generation to continue the journey, when there's not enough milkweed present for them to easily find it to lay their eggs on, they know they're near the end of their life. They're going to lay their eggs on something, but the larvae don't survive because it's not
Right.
milkweed that they hatch out onto. So, if you want more monarchs, you've got to have more milkweed.
Right.
Yeah, good point. I'm following up another comment about the beauty berry that after the berries form, the branches seem to drop off. And I said, do squirrels cause this? I personally think squirrels cause everything negative. But,
I don't
but
know. I've never seen that.
I'm sorry I
Might
had to
be
say that.
kids walking around the backyard, dogs,
But I think it refers back, as Terry and Bob said, maybe the problem is the soil or something that's causing them to be fragile. I haven't had that problem.
I haven't either. They are pretty hard. They're damn hardy plants. They are really hardy. Of all the native plants, they're some of the most hardy. Unless there's poison in the soil or something. But take us get a soil test, and you'll know.
I think that's the start. Another one, I planted coral beans from I guess that's the National Wildlife Resources last fall, and they didn't make it through the winter. Any thoughts why? Coral beans?
I'm not sure why, but I have had some experience in that. I always cut my coral beans back almost to the ground. Well, about a foot from the ground every year after it freezes. When the spring comes on, I cut them back because they, for some reason, they like it. But I have never had any problems with that at all. I'm not
And
sure.
I don't know if Beth was talking about planting the
If it's
beans or
open
the
to
plants.
yeah, if it's open to the wind. Oh, she planted coral beans. Oh, I see.
Yeah, I said it may be the beans, and those are kind of notoriously hard to start. But go ahead, Bob.
The beans need to be soaked or scraped because they're so hard. The coatings of the beans are so hard that you can take a fingernail clipper and just clip the end so that the embryo can get out of the shell, or you can soak it and put it in the refrigerator. That's another way of doing it. and make the hull soft so that that embryo can emerge from the seed.
So Bob, there are several more comments that have come in that they're all on this same theme of something that got planted and didn't do well, and plants that are declining over time. The Nature's Way Resources coral bean person said she actually planted plants. Would you talk just for a minute, Bob, about timing and care about the size of the hole and some of the other factors that could affect how easily or how well a newly planted plant gets established? And especially as timing, you commented that, if it was too close to time for cold weather, it may not have had a chance to establish roots. But also, I think a lot of people's initial thought is when they're planting things, they should fertilize, and yet that fertilization may be stimulating leaf growth instead of root growth. So could you just talk a little bit about planting?
Sure. Native plants are designed to be planted without any kind of amendments. I mean, they didn't, for what, 400 million years, they never were fertilized by anything. They just grew. The best way I've found to plant native seeds is to rake the ground clear, add a little compost to it, just on the top, lay some compost on the top, take the seeds and put them on the ground, put them on that compost, and just stomp them in, because most native plants in this area need sunlight to germinate, just as lettuce does. Lettuce needs sunlight to germinate. So if the seed is buried, it doesn't get the sunlight. Now, if it's the plant itself, you just treat it like any other plant, make the hole twice as wide as the root ball and as deep as the root ball, and then plant the plant. But don't fill it up with compost. Fill it up with the soil you took out of the holes. Just fill it back up. It's just like you do a tree. So you don't need to fertilize. I never fertilize any of my native plants. I don't think it's necessary, and I have really pretty native plants. So I suggest don't do any of that. Some plants need to be planted in the fall because they also need cold stratification, like Texas bluebonnets. They need to be scarified either by the winter cold or artificially through putting them in your refrigerator or something. Or you can skin them by what I do is I take some gravel, light gravel, like crushed granite, and put it in a jar and put the seeds in there. And as every time I walk by, I shake it. And then, in a few weeks, they will have some of the hull scraped off, and they'll be ready for planting. But they need to be planted in the fall. And many of our plants need to be fall. I have some Rudbeckia coming up now that I planted last fall, and it's doing really well. I mean, it's starting to bloom right now, so I'll have some blooms. So that's what I do. I mean, I get my seeds from Native Plant Seeds, which is out of Junction City, over near San Antonio, near Menard, actually. Or Menard's near Junction City. I don't know what the difference is. But I don't spend a lot of time planting my plants. I just do them. And talking about beauty berries, I don't even plant beauty berries. The birds plant them for me, and I got to go dig them up. So
Right.
you get the same thing, Paul, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I think that, and I said it, I will say that I hardly ever go outside in the morning and not see a cardinal or another bird up in those berries. So they're very attractive. But and I think the old adage about, at least with trees and probably with any plant, is don't put a $20 tree in a $5 hole.
Right, exactly. Well, I can't. The thing
You need
about
to make sure it's big enough and ready to receive, let the roots start. Don't just
exactly,
put it in the ground.
yeah.
Terry, got anything else?
Well, there's several folks who have thanked you, Bob, for a great presentation. But before we totally leave this beauty berry topic, um, so we had that awful dry spell last year, and then we had all that rain.
Yeah.
Uh, Besides all the other planting aspects, how difficult, if you think about where you see beautyberry out there in the quote natural areas, it's
Mhm.
usually growing along edges so that it's in partial shade.
Yep.
Um, After that big heat we had last summer, followed by all that rain, do you think that could have had an effect on it too, Bob?
Uh, I probably, yeah. Although mine's growing in the sun, full sun, and it's beautiful. Uh, so I'm not,
Mine's in almost full shade. So,
yeah, so it's pretty resilient. It can grow just about anywhere.
but it is an undergrowth type plant,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, the drought, well, that had a lot of effect. Obviously, the two freezes, two droughts, and so many plants had a trouble with that. Anything else?
I see a question here that says Nandina berries are toxic to birds. They're also
Yeah,
toxic to humans. So don't let your
And
kid.
dogs.
Yes.
I think that, yeah, thanks for mentioning that one. I think going back to the potato vine and the tallow tree is uh, probably at the top of my list. You know, you can have a tallow tree with what 100,000, 200,000 seeds
Oh, yeah.
every year that just fall and go down the river, down the stream, down the road.
Yep.
So they're so invasive. Um, But I just wanted to mention that that happens to be one of the tasks that Woodlands Green is taking on as an invasive task force, and you can always go to our site and contact us because we have a group and a leader that goal in life is to rid the world of potato vines and tallow trees. And so please do that. Because like Terry said, the tallow trees, I mean, they're so invasive that they just block everything else out. They came down here because people thought they had pretty colors and
Yep.
uh, pretty leaves, and they do.
They
All
were actually
trillion of them.
they were actually introduced by Benjamin Franklin in like 1784 or something like that because he thought they could start an industry making candles from the berries. But
Fortunately, yeah.
yeah,
Fortunately, he did some other good stuff.
right, exactly. Yeah.
So,
Anyway, also I wanted to mention Terry, if I'm wrong, but on May the 23rd, we're going to have another discussion about the Spring Creek Water Protection Plan that's been developed with HGAC, TCQ, and she'll be here on the 23rd of May to talk again. She's been here before, but it's time for an update. Again,
the,
remember,
the EPA has approved our proposed watershed protection plan. HJC has begun receiving funding to implement it. And so there's going to be a series of meetings coming up to plan that implementation in area by area. For any who are interested, Monday night, next Monday night at afternoon at 3:30, there's an implementation planning meeting at the South Library on Lake Robbins Drive. Registration is required. If you are interested and haven't seen that notice, you're welcome to send me an email and I'll make sure you get that notice.
yeah,
There's also on Tuesday from like 10 to noon, there's an online discussion group. So there's a couple of choices. If you're interested, send me a note and I'll send you the notice that went out from HGAC. Bob, before we get completely away, Can I ask you just a couple more really quick? I know we're at 8, but that's okay. If you need to
Sure.
go, go, people. But so if I have already a lot of turf grass in my yard and I would like to begin converting to native plants,
Sure.
is it okay to just take chunks of turf out and plant areas of native, or do I have to do everything in the yard all at once?
No, you can just do a little bit at a time. I have friends who are doing that now. They're just putting a little bit at a time, not to shock the neighbors, and just kind of build it up. And you know me, Terry, my plan was to shock the neighbors, and so I did it all at once. But that was just me. And actually, my neighbors, I live in a subdivision. My neighbors love my yard. They absolutely love it. And you've seen pictures of my yard. I have there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just pretty plants all over the
Just
place.
is, yeah, it
So,
just is.
so Bob, if I want to buy some really good for sure native plants,
Yeah.
does Native Plant Society ever have plant sales, or do master gardeners ever have plant sales, or are there places we can get these native plants?
Yes, there are. We do have a plant sale coming up in the fall, and that will be the date hasn't been determined yet. There is a native plant place. Martin Symington has a place. It's off Lone Star Drive over in Montgomery, right off 140, 149, and just outside of Montgomery. He is so knowledgeable about plants, and he's got tons and tons of native plants that he grew himself, and he's really avid about that. I mean, he's religious about his native plants. Also, Arborgate has great native plants. I used to be able to find good native plants at Nature's Way, but I'm not sure if they're available now. I haven't been over there in a while. Also, Native American seeds, and you could Google them. Just Google Native American seeds, and they are by far the very best place for native seeds, native plant seeds, and they have them divided by areas, so you can put in where you live, and you can find plants that meet those specifications for our native area. And to find out more, you could always go to Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. It's wildflower.org. Or you could go to the Native Plant Society of Texas, and they have a whole inventory of plants. They're not selling them, but they have a great inventory, so you can kind of look and say what you want on either of those sites. Say, oh, that's great information. That's a great plant. Maybe I could do this here. Let me look and see if if it can be planted here. But Native Plant Seeds is the best place for seeds. And I would say Arborgate and and Lindsay's Plants too. He's in Conroe.
Yeah, you mentioned Kat Christensen is planting natives around the Environmental Services building. Those are all from Lindsay's native plants, and they really seem to be doing well. The guy in Montgomery that you mentioned, Simonton, what is the name of his business again?
Lone Star Nursery. No, Lone Star Native Plant Nursery.
Harriet, I read about this the other day, but Kathy Herrick, now from the Austin area, has pointed out that you can check with HEB. Some of those Native Plant Society have partnered with them to sell several natives during Native Plant Week. So, I mean, even HEB, which is encouraging that the mainstream is starting to kind of pile on and get on board. So
the Native Plant Society actually went to HEB. The people up in Austin went to HEB and asked them to do this. And when they first opened it up, we had contingents from our chapter go to most of the HEBs to promote native plants. So,
right.
Yeah.
And just so you'll know, Woodlands Green and Environmental Services and Woodlands Water and Native Plant Society Pines and Prairies chapter will all be at the Allspa's Ace Hardware store on September 7 for yet another year of Community Garden Day. And Allspa's always brings in a great selection of native plants that are on Woodlands Water rebate list, so that you can come there on that day or any other time around that time to buy natives that qualify for a rebate on your water bill if you get your water bill from Woodlands Water Agency. So save September 7 on your calendar to come to Allspa's back there at Kirkendall and the Parkway.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Woodlands Water's been participating in that for a while, where they have a list of natives. If you can show that you purchased those plants, then you can get a little rebate back from the Woodlands Water Agency. So I think we've kept everybody long enough. What a great discussion, and a lot of comments, Bob, coming up about, and I'm sure I'll get emails tonight and tomorrow about the good job that you've done.
Thank you.
And I would ask everybody watching to share this, tell people that it will be on the website within a week. I think it will have a repeat of it that you can watch it on YouTube, and also just spread the word what the Woodlands Green is about. I don't ever watch any of these without learning something, and I think if you can tell your friends that, probably the same thing will happen to them if they tune into one of our talks. So until May the 23rd, I
Bob,
appreciate
you
it.
were wonderful as always. Thank you so much for making the time for us. We love
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Paul, for the nice words, both of you.
Thanks everybody who showed up tonight. What a great group, great questions. We may not have gotten to every question, but we tried, and you're welcome. I've just put my email address in the chat. You're welcome to send me an email. Just so you'll know, this presentation tonight was recorded, so John Geiger will see to it in the next few days that it gets posted. A link to it gets posted on the woodlandsgreen.org website, so that you can watch it as many times as you want.
And share it.
And share it.
But also, yeah, and thanks, Terry. I said, do send an email to Terry. I know this much about her, that if she doesn't know the answer, she knows somebody that does.
Probably Paul Nelson.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, all of you guys, and
Thanks
appreciate it.
again for coming out tonight, everybody. Love you.